Thank you. Mention Chaucer's to anyone in this area, and they'll all say the same thing. I love Chaucer's. So it's great to be here. And thank you, everyone who came, including some of the people who are thanked in my acknowledgments, so that makes it special. Rebecca and Karen, and others who I hope will be coming a little later. I'm going to skip around and read from different parts of the book. This one starts on page 20. And people don't usually write to advice columnists when everything in their life is exactly the way they want it to be. But Happy Singleness did just that when she sought counsel from Washington Post's Carolyn Hacks. Quote, I have meaningful work, a home I love, good relationships with my 3 children and excellent friends, she said. The problem? She said, my children are suggesting I should be dating, and suddenly I'm noticing so much societal pressure to pair off. Even articles, books, blogs about happy single life, traveling, social life, all seem to say, do these things and then you'll be ready when Mr. Right comes along. But I am happy now. Dates are fine, but I usually come home thinking I would have been happier reading a book. Still, I wonder, will I stay this happy? Would it be better to have a partner in my golden years? Should I put some effort into finding one? If it's not clear just how stunning that question is, do something I will advise you to do throughout this book. Flip the script and imagine a married person asking something comparable. Quote, I have been married for 8 years. My life is really good. My marriage is really good. I have a home I love and good relationships with my kids. But I wonder, will I stay this happy? Would it be better to split up now so that I have enough time to invest in a life of my own? That way, I could nurture relationships with all the adults who matter to me rather than focusing primarily on one person. I could develop the skills and strategies I need to live my life fully and joyfully, no matter who is or is not around. Should I put more effort into living on my own? Well, that sort of inquiry seems inconceivable, but it shouldn't be. I don't mean that I want to encourage divorce among those who are happily married. I don't. But I do want to revolutionize the way we think about being single. Happy Singleness, the person who wrote the letter, was right about the books, articles, and blogs that seem to be offering an upbeat view of single life, only to end up rather grudging about the matter. We should stay single, they tell us, while we ready ourselves for the time when our real lives begin, or begin again when the right person comes along. All those writers, steeped in the prevailing narratives of what it means to be single, are talking past the millions of people who want something different, something that describes and validates their experiences and makes them feel seen. This book is dedicated to all the people craving a more enlightened understanding of single life. So now I'm going to go to the very beginning of the book, the introduction. Lovers of single life, set yourselves free. Unshackle yourselves from those old regressive stories that claim that single life is sad and lonely. Rise above those repressive notions that everyone wants a romantic partner. And if you think you don't, you'll get over it. And if you don't get over it, you need help. Gleefully reject the idea that putting a romantic partner at the center of life is something you have to do, something everyone wants, or that it is the normal, natural, and superior way to live. I have a new story to tell you. It is based on experiences of people all around the world who are telling their stories, often for the first time. It is also grounded in social science studies of hundreds, thousands, and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people. My story is about people who are powerfully drawn to single life. I call them single at heart, and I'm one of them. For us, single life is our best life. It is our most authentic, meaningful, and fulfilling life. It is a psychologically rich life. No other way of life will ever feel as profoundly satisfying. We are the curators of our lives. Being single doesn't limit our lives, it throws them wide open. We have our freedom, and we use it to make the most of our resources and opportunities, however vast or meager they may be. We get to decide the shape and contours of our lives, from our daily routines to life-altering transformations. We get to pursue our interests and our passions without trying to refashion or resize them in ways that suit a romantic partner. We get to welcome into our lives anyone we want: friends, relatives, mentors, colleagues, lovers, neighbors, spiritual figures, pets, or anyone else. As many or as few as we like, with no pressure to elevate a romantic partner above all others. We can devote ourselves to our inner circle, our larger communities, our causes, if that's what we want to do. We create homes that are our sanctuaries. We have our sweet, sweet solitude. If we don't want kids, no partner is going to pout. If we do have kids, we get to raise them as we see fit. We enjoy intimacy on our own terms. The risk to people who are single at heart is not what we will miss if we do not put a romantic partner at the center of our lives, but what we will miss if we do. I will never say that it's okay to be single. I will never say that it's better to be single than to be in a bad romantic relationship, or that it's better to be single than to wish you were. All those sentiments are far too grudging. For people like us, it is better to be single, period. Skipping up to a little further in the introduction. Single at heart is for the millions of people. Oh no, that's wrong, sorry. I had these all numbered. Okay. Because we who are single at heart are embracing our single lives rather than trying to escape them, we develop strengths, skills, resources, and attitudes that are less often honed by those who lead a conventionally coupled life. The time, money, and emotional resources that some other people devote to their pursuit of a romantic partner and then bestow upon that partner if they find such a person, we invest in the experiences that make our lives meaningful and that can never be taken away from us by a divorce or any other casualty of coupling. We value our friends rather than looking past them for the romantic partner who may be on the horizon or waiting for us at home. Because we don't split the tasks of everyday life with a romantic partner, we learn how to cover everything ourselves, either by mastering each task, finding ways around it, or figuring out how to find people who will help or who we can hire. Because we plan to stay single, we create homes that will continue to accommodate, comfort, and inspire us as we age. Our years of investing in our single lives and embracing all that single life has to offer pay off all along the way, but the investment comes to its ultimate stereotype-shattering pinnacle later in life. We've been warned that we are going to end up decrepit, despondent, despairing, and oh so alone when we are old, but that's not what happens. Studies show that it is the people who have stayed single who are most likely to be thriving in later life. And then I describe a bunch of those studies. I'm going to tell you about two features that are recurrent throughout the book before I then end with a final personal anecdote. So one of those features is what I called fixed it. And I take something that someone said, usually someone influential or famous, but not always, and then I take what they said and I fix it because they got it wrong. So I'm going to start with one example from Vivek Murthy, who is the U.S. Surgeon General. And his whole thing is loneliness, and he's worried about that, so good for him. And he wrote a book called Together. And in the book called Together, he has this sentence. Although he was single, he had a community of people he liked. Yeah, really. So I fixed it. And my fixed it was, like so many other single people, he had a community of people he liked. I mean, the Surgeon General's version was, oh my God, can you believe it? He had a community of people he liked even though he was single. How could a single person have people they like? And I was like, no. And this is not just me being outraged, but there are several big nationally representative samples that show that on average, people who are single are more connected to more different people than people who are married. Now, obviously, there are social scientists in the room that know this, but any study is based on averages. So, of course, there are going to be many married people who are very connected and many single people who aren't. But on average, Vivek Murthy has it exactly wrong. Okay, so there are a bunch of those all through. And then I'm going to give you one more example of what I call flipping the script. I kind of did that with the Carolyn Hack's advice column example, but let me give you one more. This was an email sent to me by a man named Simon. Actually, that's not his real name, but it's the one he wants me to use. So Simon emailed me and he said, I've been completely single for over 11 years with only one relationship before then. About 3 years ago, I started solo traveling for the first time, and there I discovered an intense joy I felt while being completely alone. I believe it was actually life-changing. However, sometimes the longing for love, for romantic connection still comes up. And occasionally, it gets so strong that sometimes I wonder if all the traveling, all the fun things that I do by myself are really just a way to fill the hole in my life, when what I actually want is to be in a relationship. How do we know if we really like being single, or if we're just covering up a void of not having a relationship? So what I wrote back to Simon was, I don't think there is an obvious answer to your question, but I do think that cultural conditioning makes it way more likely that we will think we crave romantic relationships than to think we crave solitude. Now, here's the flipping the script part. Imagine if we flipped the script and Simon instead asked this. About 3 years ago, I got married for the first time and discovered an intense joy I felt from my connection to my spouse. I believe it was actually life-changing. However, sometimes my longing for what I had when I was single still comes up, and occasionally it gets so strong that sometimes I wonder if all the attention I am lavishing on my spouse and all that I invest in my marriage are just a way to fill the hole in my life when what I actually want is to be single. So until Simon's question and my flipped version of it are equally plausible, people who love their single lives are going to feel more pressure to doubt themselves than people who love being coupled ever will. And that means that neither single people nor coupled people are totally free to know what they really want and to live their most authentic lives. Okay, so now I'm going to end with the personal story that I ended my introduction with. And I wrote this a year ago. As I write this, I am 69 years old, living in Summerlin, California, and I've been single my whole life. I live alone and don't have kids or pets. I had a few romantic relationships when I was very young. I would have been truer to myself if I had none at all. I wake up every day feeling immensely grateful that I get to live this life that I cherish. For the first 45 years of my life, my mother never said a word about my single status. In the 7 years she lived after my father died, we occasionally traveled together, just the two of us, and we spent some holidays together. We talked about a lot of things, but she never pressured me to marry, not even subtly. I was proud of that. I thought it meant that she could see that staying single wasn't an issue for me. I never complained about it, collected bridal magazines, or mused dreamily about some future prince. I had an engaging career in Charlottesville, where I taught at the University of Virginia for several decades. I owned a home that I loved. I've always had close friends, and she's met many of them. In the last conversation I had alone with her, as she lay dying, she brought up my single life for the first time. I worry about you, she said. I don't remember what I said in response, but I do remember that I was stunned and saddened. I wish she had understood that for me, and for millions like me, staying single was how I stayed happy and fulfilled. I wish I knew then what I know now and could have helped her to understand. I wish I had already written this book. That's all. So, any questions?
Comments or questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you became single at an early age.
I have always been single.
No,
Yes.
I have never seen the other side. Huh?
That's correct. I haven't, and don't want to.
You realize there is another side.
Yeah, I do, and that's all we ever hear about. So I thought it was time for those of us who are single and stay single and love being single to get our say, and to get our say without being apologetic or saying, oh, because there are a lot of books written about people who are single, or written for them or by them, and they're always hedging. So they'll say, oh yes, it's great being single, but if the right person came along, well, it's time for us to stop with this, thinking that it's lesser life to be single. And I think there's a real craving for it. I wrote, the day before my book came out on December 5th, I wrote an essay for the Huffington Post, which I thought was just a nothing. My publicist got it for me, so I said, okay, yeah, I'll write it, but I don't read the Huffington Post, so I didn't think anyone else did either. So the essay was called something like, I'm 70 and I've always lived alone. Here's what everybody gets wrong about being single. And it was this very positive, affirming, what you heard reflected here tonight, how much I love it. Well, it went viral immediately. It was shared everywhere. It was on Yahoo, it was on MSN, and I got about 100 personal emails from people saying that they felt validated for the first time in their life. Oh, and one really mean one. I always get mean ones. And what was interesting, and maybe just because it had my age in the title, but what was interesting is the vast majority were from older people, ages 55 to 92. And I think what that means is and some of them said this directly, they're really tired of the caricature of, if you're old and single, you're going to be isolated and lonely, and you poor thing. And, some single people really are, but, there are a lot of us who don't fit that caricature. And I think there's an eagerness for something different. It's a long answer to your question. Yes.
I don't know quite how to say this. I have no problem with what you're presenting. I've been married, got divorced a long time ago, and have had some relationships, etc. But I don't think I've seen you for so long. I don't think you know about this. For the last 9 years, I've had a relationship with a woman who lives here in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
we had both been in long distance relationships. We got to know each other, we liked each other,
Yeah.
and for the last 9 years, we are still. The title of an article about people like us that I saw is called Living Apart
Oh,
Together.
yes. Right.
And so
Right.
we have different houses
Mm-hmm.
that we live in,
Yes.
except that every weekend, one of us goes to the other one's place. And
Yeah.
whoever is hosting cooks.
Right. All right, that
And is in
sounds
charge
good.
of food.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, and then if there's something in the middle of the week that's worth going to, then we will get together and we'll go to
Yeah,
it, of course.
you should have brought her to this.
And, and, then we basically have a phone call almost every night.
Yeah.
But it's like, we don't have any desire to decide which
Right.
place are we gonna move into.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we just live apart together.
Living apart together is a growing thing. It's getting more and more attention.
Yep.
And one of the things that's come up about being single at heart is the people who describe situations like yours sometimes tell me that they're single at heart, even though they're part of a committed couple. And when I first started doing this, I thought there would be people who were in a committed couple or married and single at heart, but they would be a different situation than yours. They would be people who got married because they thought it was what they should do and realized, you know, I would just rather be single. That's who I really am. But they stay married because they want to honor their vows. And when I first started writing my Psych Today column, it's called Living Single. I've been writing it since 2008. In the first decade or so, they let people post comments. And every time I wrote something relevant, he would write a comment saying, oh, I wish I had this part of single life. You know, I love this about being single, I love that. And he said there's no way he was going to leave his spouse because he may have even loved her and she didn't do anything wrong and he promised to stay with her, so he was going to stay with her. But he wrote in response to all of my blog posts, I wish this were me.
Oh.
So that's what I thought. But then I heard from people who were living apart together and they said, and they want to be considered single at heart too. And they have situations like Dave's where they give each other a lot of space. It might be physical space. They live apart from each other, or emotional space. They don't think that, you know, they have to. Well, one person said to me, you know that thing that couples like to do where they come home and they say, how was your day? How was your day? Some of these people who are coupled and single at heart say, they don't want to do that. When they get home, they just want to decompress. Don't ask me how my day was. So I kind of go along with them saying they're single at heart. I'm a little conflicted about that. But I love the fact that they want to identify as single at heart. I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Interesting. I was just curious, Dr.
Yeah.
Paul, how did you make this your life's work? And how did that evolve?
Yeah, okay, so, you know, like I said, I've never been married. I never wanted to. But for a long time, I thought that I was just late. You know, I thought that wanting to get married was kind of like getting bitten by a bug. And I just hadn't gotten bitten yet. And I don't remember when exactly I realized that I was never going to get bitten. That single was who I was. I was always going to love it. It wasn't one aha moment, but I think it happened in my 30s. And once I fully realized that, it was this great transformation because then I could totally invest in my single life. I didn't have to think to myself, well, you know, maybe I'll meet someone and buy a house with them or something. I just do my own thing.
Yeah.
So then I was wondering about, I was noticing how single people got treated. Like at the University of Virginia, when I first got there, the person who organized the class schedule wanted me to come in and teach at night because she said it would be too hard for the married faculty. And this was before any of them even had kids. So I started asking people I knew who were single if they had any examples like that. The first time I did it, it was at a social event at the University of Virginia. One of the faculty members had this big backyard, and we all gathered there. And so I asked one person, and she started telling me her stories. And then somebody else joined us. Then somebody else joined us. Then we had this circle of people, and we talked the entire rest of the event. Then the next day, I got up, opened my email, and had emails from some of them saying, "Oh, and another thing." so then I was doing a whole different kind of work then. I was doing research on the psychology of lying and detecting lies. And I got invited to give a talk at Yale. And afterwards, they had this little reception for me, and I did the same thing. I asked the single people, have you ever felt like you got treated as, lesser than, maybe you go to visit someone and you get the couch in the living room rather than a bedroom with a door that shuts, that kind of stuff. And, the exact same thing happened. A whole circle came around, and then they emailed me the next day. So that's when I realized that this was really something that was striking a chord and needed to be addressed. And that was before I even knew that all these things that I've been reading, that you see in the papers all the time or the media, get married and you'll be happier and healthier and you'll live longer. Wow. I was trained by a research methodologist named Robert Rosenthal, who just died a few days ago. Sadly. Yeah. He made it to 90, so I think that's pretty good. He was amazing. Oh my gosh, I have such a place in my heart for him. But what was I talking about?
The data, looking at this.
Oh, right. Oh,
yeah.
yeah, thank you. So I was trained as a methodologist, so I was just stunned when I went and looked at these original studies and found that, they don't support that conclusion. They were comparing people who are currently married to people who are single and saying, oh, married people win, without, telling you that they are setting aside the 40-some% of people who got married, got divorced, and they didn't get divorced because marriage was making them happier and healthier. So it's what I call a cheater technique. And if instead you look at studies that follow people for years and years over the course of their lives, asking them every single year, how happy are you, are you married, are you single, whatever, they find that people who get married become a little happier on average around the time of the wedding. Then they go back to being as happy or as unhappy as they were when they were single. And the only people who get that, they call it the honeymoon effect, are the people who got married and stayed married. The people who were headed for divorce were already getting a little less happy as their wedding day approached. And again, I'll say, this is based on averages, there are lots of exceptions, but it just, oh my gosh, it just drove me over the edge to find out that all these things that people accept, you can find these kinds of findings in Supreme Court decisions like they're true. It's, no. So anyway, that's a long answer to how I got into this.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, wanting to, I can't even think what I was going to say, wanting to, in my family, we like to be alone.
Yeah.
So my daughters were saying that, is there something wrong?
Oh my gosh.
Not wrong, but yeah,
Yes.
because my grandmother lived alone, my mother. Anyway, and I'm living alone, so, and I like it. But I think it's more a thing of society's changing, because I saw something, I didn't read the article, but it said they now can tell if your marriage is going to last. So they must have, I don't know if you've read, I didn't read it, but they can tell people that are bound to get divorced. I am divorced, but
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah. Well,
almost bound. I'm just saying there must be tendencies in the human relationships that don't cause a human to be at ease.
Yeah. Well, people who are single at heart, all of them love their alone time. Now, they still have friends and they're connected and all that, but every last one of them likes spending time, having time to themselves. And they don't worry about being lonely, and that means they're actually less lonely. But I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something else that is one of my pet peeves. The way being alone gets characterized as isolated. You know, you're going to be a school shooter and kill all your classmates. And, you know, no, I'm not. You know, I'm really not. And I think there are two kinds of alone, at least. I mean, one is you're alone because you got rejected and ostracized and nobody ever includes you, and that's a horrible, painful kind of alone. But then there's the alone of the single at heart, where we find the time we have to ourselves relaxing, or good for creativity, for spirituality, or for, you know, or for being who we really are. And that's a good kind of alone. And I actually think of that as kind of a superpower, because if you love your alone time, you're kind of protected from feeling lonely. I mean, not entirely, but, and that got us through a pandemic. My one point when I lost confidence in what I was doing, or was worried that it was all going to come apart, was when the pandemic started and we were under lockdown. And I thought, oh my gosh, here I've been going along saying, you know, oh, we all love being single and we want to stay single, blah, 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 blah. What if the pandemic sends us all like lurching into the arms of a romantic partner just to you know, get away from the isolation? So I waited a little while before I was willing to ask the people that have been sharing my life stories with me. But then I started asking them, and one after another, they said no. You know, some things have been hard. A lot of them had financial problems. But they were ready for being on their own, because they already had solo hobbies that they liked, like, you know, exercise or gardening or reading or yoga or whatever it is. And another thing is, it's a superpower, because if you like being alone, then you are less likely to become the caricature of the old and isolated and unhappy person. Yeah.
I wonder, I've started your book, and you may address this, but the connection between being single at heart and introversion.
Oh, yes. So I thought that our love of solitude meant that we were introverts. And it turns out that people who are single at heart are more likely to be introverts than people who aren't. But we also include a few extroverts, some people who consider themselves in the middle somehow. And there is now, after all this decades of research on loneliness, now there are scholars who are studying solitude. And what they are finding is what predicts if you enjoy your solitude instead of feeling uncomfortable and unhappy and all that, is whether you're living authentically. So if you are true to yourself, you are going to be more comfortable in solitude. And I think that's because, you know, when you're alone, you're face to face with yourself, and if you're a phony, you're not that much fun to be with.
What did Socrates say? Know thyself.
Yeah,
And it's
right.
not your personality, it's the divine. I feel it as the divine, whatever we perceive it inside, is the best companion.
Yeah.
And then whatever manifests, you know, now in our age, I feel like a lot that was being said was, you can manifest this, you know, use a vision board, get this, you know, and I was like, for me, I didn't want to feel like that was wrong, but I didn't want to feel like I was missing something, because I didn't do that.
Yeah. I didn't either. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Right. Yeah.
I've had kind of a different journey. I've had relationships and marriage, and then I've been single for the last 12 years, and realizing that I really like it a lot, and have gotten very comfortable with it, and done some of the things you've mentioned about having my own hobbies, and yet have social interaction with people. The one thing I noticed that I don't like as much is you know, I went through newcomers and all of that with
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people, and then the couples all got together.
Yeah,
And as
right.
a single woman, you're not included in any of that. Even though you seemed like you were friends and
Yes.
had some interesting interactions, but you
Right.
are excluded.
Yes, and it's not just your imagination. There are a number of studies in all different countries of people who get married or couples who, the United States one, for example, couples who move in together or get married become more insular. So they pay less attention to their friends, they call their parents less often, and the people who stay single don't do that. I mean, they're still in touch with people. And again, it's averages. Some people who get married are just as connected or even more so. But on average, yeah, you get ditched or you get demoted.
Well, I think, I don't know, it's,
Yeah.
it's the women that don't want another woman around. And
Oh. I don't know.
Which is kind of silly because
Yeah, it is.
if you're an independent kind of
Yeah.
confident person,
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean you're
Right.
trying to steal their husband.
Really? One thing I did, and I hope this will become more common, is in 2015, I started an online Facebook group called the Community of Single People. And it's for single people who like being single. So we talk about every aspect of single life except what people expect single people to talk about, like dating and trying to become unsingle. So no talk of unsingling ourselves. And there are now more than 8,000 people from more than 100 countries in the group.
Oh,
Yeah. Actually, after that Huffington Post article went viral, I think 600 people joined in 2 days. So, and so that's one way, is to have a community where people don't think that single life is a lesser life and that what we should all be obsessing about is how we find our man or our woman or whatever. So that's been good.
Can you repeat that, the name of the Facebook?
Oh, it's Community of Single People. And it's a closed group, so you have to apply to get in, but as long as you're not using it for dating, you'll get it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Let's take one more question.
Okay.
Comments?
Yes, Nancy.
I admire so much all the incredible work you've been doing, and I love this new book. And so you have been such an incredible advocate for change in science and in our culture. Do you feel, maybe 15 or 20 years into this journey, are you seeing positive change? I feel like I see it when I see so much more conversation about single life, and I see, all of the press and all of the great work that you're doing. How do you feel about the cultural shift from when you started this, when you wrote your first book, Singled Out, to talk about singles being stereotyped, and it was so beautiful. It was so like, oh my gosh, I never realized that. So where do you see now compared to your first book?
Okay, so let me address the culture at large, and then since we're fellow academics, and a number of us are, I'll talk about it from inside academia. But in the culture at large, it has been mostly positive. So to give you just kind of some random example, when I was first starting to do this and publications were first starting to let people leave comments, if somebody wrote something that was derogatory towards single, I'd jump in and I'd write a comment objecting, and I'd be the only one. Then, a few years later, if I did that, there would be 12 other people who already, So I think overall, there's much more acknowledgement of single life as a potentially positive life. But at the same time, there's backlash. So right now you're getting a lot of, there's this book that got tons and tons of attention saying married parent families really are better, suck it up. It got all this attention. And Brad Wilcox, who's this, totally pro-marriage guy, he wrote a book that's coming out right before Valentine's Day, and it was like, it's the title is something like "Get Married, Save Civilizations, and Make Liberals Mad."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. Now, within academia, when I first started, I mean, hardly anyone identified as a scholar of single people. And so what I was hoping for is that more and more people would start to study single people. And in just the last couple of years, it's like I went over a cliff, it suddenly really happened. And so that's mostly good, but watch what you wish for. So some of the people who study this come out of laboratories where what they really are interested in is personal relationships, by which they really mean romantic relationships. And so they have some of their data is great, but they interpret it in a way that is so derogatory. I have that as one of my, flip the script, I'll just say this is my last thing because I know you're all standing. But, so there's this group of scholars, and they analyze this data showing that from age 18 all the way through the oldest person, I think was in their 90s or maybe 102, and they found that at every single age, people who were single on average were happy. And from age 40 on, the people who were single, unlike the married people, got happier and happier and happier. Their interpretation of those amazing data was that the single people by age 40 had come to terms with their single life. That they had learned how to be happily single. So it's like, and they published this under the banner of science. Like science is telling you, these single people, okay, yeah, they're happy. They came to terms with their sorry single lives. And that just drives me crazy. And the person in charge of that lab, he is now generating, like he has a cottage industry of students and colleagues, and they churn out these studies, and they're going to do it for decades. And the studies are good, but the interpretations are demeaning. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.